All right, welcome everybody to this week's episode of Unbroken Veterans. Today, we're going to do a little twist and interview our interviewers.
Yeah,
And
that's exactly what we're doing.
I'm going to interview Sam.
Couldn't have said that better myself.
Well, like most of our veteran success stories, we start out with a funny story. So, Sam, take it away.
Absolutely. I've got a lot of them, but I'm going to start with one that's not too long and is probably my favorite. In basic training, for those of you who are unaware, that the drill sergeants will have you in a formation, standing, waiting around, waiting to do God knows what. And they'll kind of screw with you and talk to you while you're in formation. So one time in particular, this guy, Drill Sergeant Kinsey, I swear to this day he was 9 feet tall. He was going around and he was talking to people and getting in their face and asking them questions, such as he came up to one guy and said, "Gruber, you got yourself a girlfriend?" "No, Drill Sergeant." And Drill Sergeant Kinsey just kind of stares him down. He's like, "It's because you ain't got no confidence. Get yourself some confidence. You get yourself a girlfriend."
Good advice.
Yeah, it was good advice. So then he continued on moving, and then he turns to the next person. "Fisher, you got yourself a girlfriend?" "No, Drill Sergeant." "It's because you ain't got no dang confidence. You get yourself some confidence. You get yourself a girlfriend." "Okay, Drill Sergeant." "Yes, Drill Sergeant." And then Drill Sergeant Kinsey approaches this other gentleman. He says, "Stevens." Now I'm going to pause the story here because Stevens had come out to us in reception, which is where you go before basic training. They had a talk with us about sexuality, and not from the standpoint of education, but the standpoint of they want everyone to feel accepted, and if there's any issues, we needed to hash them out as a group before we moved on to tackle some of the hardest things we do with our lives. So Stevens told us that he had a husband, and he was comfortable telling us that, and everyone was comfortable with that. So we moved on with our lives. No big deal. So back to the story. Drill Sergeant Kinsey comes up and says, "Stevens!" And we all think, "Oh, man, what's going to happen?" I think, "Yes, Drill Sergeant." "You got yourself a girlfriend?" "I have a husband, Drill Sergeant." "Well, it looks like you got some confidence after all." And I couldn't believe the recovery. It was, to this day, one of the craziest things I've ever seen. He didn't miss a beat. It's like he knew. But anyway, I think that is one of the funniest stories I've ever witnessed.
Stevens did have some confidence, man.
He did.
That's awesome.
So, what do you got for me?
All right. All right, Sam. Who are you and what do you do?
My name is Sam Piana. I have served in the Army Reserve for 10 years at this point, a little over, almost 10 and a half. And I've been through one tour in Afghanistan with you, of course, and some others. And from there, I've been a combat engineer the entire time. So training to look for IEDs, and then fortunately, I finally got to do what I was training to do for like 8 years. So that was a great way to top that off. As far as civilian side, I currently work at a distributor, and I sell valves. So mostly industrial and municipal, not really residential. We have a warehouse, and so I'm kind of outside, inside sales. So I sell the power plants and water and wastewater stations and M&M factory and all kinds of places like that. And I am a dad and a husband. I've got 2 kids, just 1 wife though.
All right, and then what was your motivation to join up and serve in the military?
So I had a couple actually. The primary one, which I'll get to second, but one was I'd always really enjoyed reading military books, and I'd always been interested in just breaking the mold and going on adventures, basically, which I've certainly done in my time. Reading, one of the first ones was Rogue Warrior by Richard Marcinko, who I actually got to meet one day, and that was really cool, which especially now because he's passed. And I have his signature on a shot glass, and so he was a really cool guy, and I enjoyed his book, Rogue Warrior. And then also reading Marcus Luttrell's book, Lone Survivor. That was a big one for me. But then What really was the push over the cliff was I was tired of seeing veterans, in the store or wherever, and thanking them for their service while knowing that I was an able-bodied person and could serve as well. And I thought the best way to actually thank them was to go serve myself. And so which now I still thank veterans for their service because everybody's done it, or everybody who has done it still deserves thanks, whether you've done it or not. But I feel good in that I've at least feel that I've done my part, and continuing to with this podcast.
That's amazing. That's really noble because that is one huge reason why a lot of people, well, most of us do it, is because we can, and we do it for those that cannot.
Absolutely.
That's awesome.
Yeah, and I've known people that for one reason or another couldn't, and there's a lot of people have their stories, but I'm talking about people I know that for real reasons could not. And it goes cut out. People that then lie about injuries and stuff to get in. Those were not options for these people, and so they're also people I think about sometimes when I do Army stuff. Is those people really could not? So
makes you think of like. Back in, I don't know, maybe it was like World War I or World War II, some people would lie about their age just to go and serve. Like, that's just so amazing. Like,
it's that patriotism and the motivation to be a part of something bigger than yourself and to do something for your country.
So selfless.
Yeah.
All right. So, Sam, if you could go back in time to the day you joined the military, what advice would you give yourself?
So a little bit pertains to just my situation, but it also pertains to, I'm sure, a lot of other people's situation. Is when I joined, I was in my early 20s, so, as far as basic goes, I was a little bit old, but not that old. But the point is that for the beginning of my military service, I was single, and I really wasn't tied down. I didn't even have a career initially that I didn't want to give up. I felt obligated to make sure I was at work, which is probably a good thing and part of my work ethic, but I really look back and I wish I had taken advantage, even being in the reserve, of more training opportunities and even trying out other MOSs. I'm glad that I'm a combat engineer. I'm very glad that I had a deployment, especially as a combat engineer. That's important to me. But it would have been interesting to try out even some harder MOSs. I definitely wish I had pushed it harder and taken advantage of all that time, because now I look back and I think, oh, there's all these other things I would have been interested to do. So if you're out there and you're already in and thinking about taking the next step to do something harder, or you haven't even joined yet and you're wondering what you should do, it's my recommendation is push the envelope and almost look at it as finding out what you can't do.
Yeah. Wow, that was great advice. What were the most important veteran benefits that you utilize in your path to where you are now?
So I didn't know about many of them, hence why we're doing the podcast.
Yeah.
But I've definitely used the VA home loan, which is a big one. And we've done research looking into the GI Bill. And so I look back, and that's another one. I wonder if I could have... I don't really like any we're going to cut this. No problem. I'll just kind of re-answer. So obviously we're doing the podcast because we didn't really know all the benefits. So the main one I've taken advantage of is the VA home loan, and that was really great. So if those of you who don't know a ton about it, because we haven't done an episode on it just yet, but one of the main benefits is that you don't have to have the PMI insurance, and also kind of joined with that, you don't have to put any money down. And initially I even thought about putting money down for the sake of payments, but then in the end, talking to the realtor, it was understood that I could put 10 grand down, have 10 grand equity, or I could put 10 grand into a project and then have $15,000 or $20,000 equity. So there's a little buying advice there, things to consider. But far as other veteran benefits, I plan to take advantage of more, so everyone will of course get to hear about that, but as of right now, I can't say that I've really taken advantage of any others.
Sam, what soft skills did you learn from the military that helped you on your path and just in your civilian life, or that transitioned well for you?
Probably, I've always been very organized, but it definitely made me kick it up a notch. And just how many things there are to remember, really learning that I have to write stuff down, and that's okay. That's understanding that it's okay. And it's funny because, especially with young kids, you've got all this stuff you have to take places. And we had a baby. She's 4 now, but now we have a baby again, and you kind of go back to all these things. So instead of getting my plate carrier and putting magazines in it with ammo, I'm getting my tactical dad bag. Shout out to Ian Burrow for getting me that. And I'm putting baby bottles in it. And I'm going through my list to make sure that I have Ziploc bags if they have a blowout diaper. And do I have extra diapers? And, where am I on wipes? You got to do basically your PCCs, PCIs for all that stuff. But I also do it when I go hunting, when I go to the range. I do it for work. And just kind of learning how to think ahead more than I ever did and really be prepared. Because one of the feelings I've always hated before and during and I'm sure after the military is when I feel unprepared, whether it's I don't have an answer for somebody or to a question, or if I don't have an item that I need. So really planning everything out, making sure I have a clear understanding. What I try to do is every time I have a question at work, I try to remember the answer as long as it's applicable to other situations. Or I try to think out questions a customer might have before I go back to them. So that way, instead of 20 emails, I can kind of square it away with the manufacturer in a couple emails and then go back to the customer. And another big one is presenting solutions, not just problems. And people hear that phrase a lot. And they'll say, don't give me problems, give me solutions. And people don't understand that unless someone explains it sometimes, which is when you're going to go to somebody and there's an issue, and this especially applies to customer service, is you can't just go to them and say, here's the problem, and then walk away. That's horrible customer service. And B, that doesn't help anybody because there's a relationship between someone higher up and the person on the ground. And the idea is you should listen to the person on the ground, but that means the person on the ground is obligated to give information about what they see. So the person on the ground doesn't just relay a problem and then walk off. You need that person's knowledge of what's surrounding the problem. So if the person on the ground can say, here's the problem, but here's a solution, or here's 3 solutions. Here's why you might go with this one and not this one, and vice versa. And the other thing is, as a leader, because sometimes you're in the middle of that relationship, and you know that, okay, here's the problem, here's 3 solutions. This one is the safest one for my guys. So how do I need to present this information that gets the decision maker to choose this? And that applies to sales. Obviously in sales, you often want someone to go a certain way. And so I'm not saying this encouraging anyone to misrepresent anything to get someone to make a choice, because that's not what I'm talking about. But I'm saying if you can present the facts and say, if I was in your situation, I would choose this. And at the end of the day, let that individual choose what they want, because you don't always know what they need. But I didn't run too long, but that's kind of a big thing I learned in the Army, is especially in the interest of taking care of the Joes under me, is, okay, how can I get this lieutenant or this platoon sergeant to make this decision that's going to benefit my Joes in a positive way? Not necessarily being lazy, but in a positive way, how to keep them safe and keep them fed and happy and morale good. So, yeah.
I really like that. And it's good advice just because, I mean, it's important to remember that everything does like you're never not learning something.
Yeah.
And that's cool how you kind of said that, how you were applying it. It's the same thing. You're still prepping for, now you're just prepping for being the best at it.
Yeah, exactly. And that's the thing that you and I talk about all the time. We always talk with guests about it. And I hope our audience picks up on that, is a lot of people think if you're in the infantry or you're a combat engineer looking for IEDs that, oh, well, what do you have to offer the civilian side? Mm-hmm. And it's actually a lot more than you think.
Yeah.
Now, a plumber or electrician in the military might have a couple more degrees of what they have to offer, but that's only if they want to do that job outside the military. There's a lot of people that choose military jobs that then don't want the same civilian job. So anyway, So yeah, there's always soft skills, always new things to learn, and always things to bring to the civilian, I don't say market, if that's the right term, but
Yeah.
the civilian world. You can always bring positive things.
Yep. Sam, what were your biggest challenges that you faced, and how did you overcome them?
So that's a good one. In 10 years, I can think of a lot of challenges, and but of course, I don't want to take up 6 episodes of our show. There's plenty of other things to talk about. So obviously, the deployment is a pretty big one, and the interesting thing about that was I always wanted to deploy. I wanted to deploy less when I got married and had a kid, but you got to play the cards you're dealt, and I did fortunately choose someone that was strong and supportive. I don't know if they listen to the show, so I'm not necessarily just talking her up because I think she's listening. I mean that from the heart. And it took a lot of communication between the two of us. Obviously, there's things we couldn't communicate, especially on my end when I was overseas. Mm-hmm. We were fortunate. Well, I say fortunate, unfortunate. We were on Bagram, which meant we had easy access to Wi-Fi, all kinds of that. I was able to talk to my family every day. There were definitely problems that came with that from within Bagram, not home. But those things made it easier. And my relationship with my daughter, I handled very carefully because she was very young. She had just turned, she's about 1.5 when I actually left country. So she was almost 2.5 when I got back. So that was a big challenge to figure out. And I'd say another challenge is, especially in the reserve segment, is balancing the reserve career and the civilian career.
Oh, that's a good one.
And they've both changed. My priorities have kind of gone back and forth depending on what my job was or how the reserve was going. Because sometimes the people don't understand that the reserve can really take it out of you, and it can be a huge strain to stay in, whether it's a financial strain or a mental strain. Because think about, you work basically more than 10 business days straight. You're basically working 12 business days straight when you have reserve weekend because you're still waking up sometimes earlier on the weekend than you are for your job. And so really staying motivated can be a huge challenge when it comes to being in the reserve and finding a reason to make the phone calls, especially as you move up the chain, because it takes a lot more time the farther you move up, and you're being compensated a little bit when you're doing it in your free time, but most of your compensation is just on drill weekends. So people like to call you a weekend warrior, and I get where they're coming from, but at the same time, there's a lot more to it than just the weekend.
Yeah.
A lot more. And so I would say that can be a strain. There's times I've had to do online classes, and so that's taking up all my time in the evenings. And so you're really figuring out how your schedule, your family, your job fits with this other thing that kind of expands and contracts depending on what your responsibilities look like.
Yeah, that's huge.
That's what I got.
All right.
Probably long-winded.
Wait, do we have to say anything? Oh, no, we're not saying anything.
No, I don't think we have to. We thank you for listening, and we hope you got something helpful out of this.
Right now, the best way to support us is to simply spread the word. If you know a fellow veteran who could use some resources to elevate their life, send them our way.
Until next time, remember to check your 0s, 5s, 10s, and 25s.